Hey guys, I just want to shoot a quick video today. I got a lot of questions lately about how we do our programming through the survey. A lot of folks are wondering how we kind of do that. So I just want to make this quick video. Figured it'd be easier than writing a blog post on it, so you can hear my thoughts on how I approach programming and how I come up with the workouts we do here at CrossFit Tri-Town. So initially, when we look at CrossFit, right? CrossFit is constantly varied functional movements at high intensity, but that constantly varied piece doesn't mean random. So we don't just pick a bunch of workouts out of a hat, kind of do what feels good that day, so on and so forth. We actually program 6 to 12 weeks at a time. And the first thing that I look at is building out a good solid strength program, because I think getting stronger obviously has health and fitness benefits for everybody. So from a strength perspective, there's certain movements that we base our training off of them. So those movements are starting, we have upper body push, upper body pull. We have hip dominant movements, we have knee dominant or squatting movements, and then we have core movements. And that's really the majority of stuff that we do from a strength training perspective can fit into one of those categories right there. Now we can further break that down. So for upper body push, we have horizontal and vertical, right? So pushing horizontal would be a bench press, a dumbbell bench press, a push-up, things like that. Upper body pushing vertical would be a shoulder press, a push press, a single arm dumbbell press, a handstand push-up, anything along those lines. Upper body pull, we also have a horizontal and a vertical component. So horizontal pull would be a pull-up. It would be like a banded pull down, something like that. A horizontal pull would be a dumbbell row, a pendlay row, a ring row, anything like that. Hip, we can break that down, if you can read that, dynamic and slow. So a dynamic hip movement would be a snatch, a clean, a kettlebell swing, anything where we're opening the hips in a very dynamic, very aggressive manner. And a slow hip movement would classically be the deadlift, very controlled, moving the weight off the ground that way. We could do a single leg kettlebell deadlift, we can do a good morning, we could do a Romanian deadlift. Those are all sort of slow hip opening type movements. Now when we look at our squatting or our knee-centric movements, we've got single leg and bilateral or double leg. So the single leg would be walking lunges, Bulgarian split squats, pistols, things like that, step-ups. And the double leg would be a front squat, a back squat, an overhead squat, a goblet squat, any basic two-legged squat. So, and in the core, we have our ab wheel rollouts. We've got the L-sits, we've got the planks, toes to bar, ab mat sit-ups, things like that we work in to get the core. And the core is also obviously developed through the other movements as we go through that. Now, once we break this down, the challenge becomes how do we put that into a program? And with CrossFit, what it is, it's a general strength conditioning program. And because we program 6 workouts a week, it's somewhat less than ideal, right? So in a perfect world, I know if I'm writing a program for an individual, I know that they're going to train for 3 days, take a rest day. I'm going to pause this while that phone rings, sorry. All right, I'm back, sorry about that. I would start over, but I've already started this video about 4 times, had to stop it, so we're just going to roll with it. So picking up where I was, CrossFit's a general strength and conditioning program, and if I was writing a program for an individual, I would know that they were going to train for 3 days straight, have a rest day, train for 2 days, have another rest day. And so I could structure their strength progression so that they would have good volume and exposure in all of these major movements. But when I write a program for the gym, it's unclear who's going to be training on what days. We're programming 6 days in a row. I don't know if people are going to come for all 6 days straight or just come Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Some folks might come Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, etc. So what we do is try to distribute these movements as evenly as possible across the 6 training days and across the training weeks, so that by the end of a 12-week cycle, you've been exposed as often as possible to as many of these as possible. And that's really the challenge. Now, within that, for each one of these, we can build progressions. And so let's just take a back squat, for example, because we all love the back squat. So the first time you see a back squat, maybe we're doing 3 sets, 10 to 12 repetitions. The next time you see it, maybe it's 8 to 10. The next time, maybe it's 4, 6 to 8. The next time, maybe it's 4 by 3 to 5. And so you sort of see that progression, right? So we want to progress from a very low intensity, higher volume rep scheme all the way down to, by the end of the cycle, we're looking to set a PR, hit a 1 rep max, hit a 3 rep max, whatever the case might be. Now the challenge is, when I don't know how often you're going to hit these, it's less than ideal. But because we are a general strength conditioning program, we do the best we can with what we have. Now, ideally, these different rep schemes would be appropriate for different folks. So depending on something that's known as your neuromuscular efficiency, we would know where to do the bulk of your training. So all the folks that are on the individual program design have programs written specifically for where they are. So let's just take an example. Let's take two guys. Let's call them Mike and Bill. Both Mike and Bill share a 300-pound 1 rep max. So same 1 rep max for the back squat of 300 pounds. Now, we do something that's called the 85% test. And what we do is we take 85% of that weight and do as many repetitions with it as we can. So 85% of that, if my math is right, would be 255. Now, Mike can do that 8 times. Bill can do that 3 times, right? And so based on those numbers, they have a very different level of neuromuscular efficiency, or in other words, how deeply they can recruit in their nervous system to move that weight. Bill is much closer to his capacity than is Mike. Mike's got a lot of room for improvement because you would think intuitively that if he can do 255 8 times, his 1 rep max should be higher than Bill, who can only do it 3 times. But it just turns out that neither right nor wrong, those numbers are different based on their efficiency. So Bill is someone who would benefit a lot from living in these lower rep ranges. Okay, so much higher load, much higher intensity at a lower rep. Mike is somebody who needs some volume, some good quality, high volume repetitions at a moderate load. So he would spend most of his training time a little bit higher up in the spectrum here. But because we write for the group, we try to progress through that sort of cycle as many times as we can to give folks the best exposure possible. I'm going to erase this real quick before we move on. So that progression happens within each of these. So if we keep this with the double leg knee dominant, so a squat, we're going to have exposure to the back squat, to the front squat, to a lesser degree the overhead squat, and the goblet squat. For a dynamic hip, we want to see the clean kettlebell swing, snatch, etc., etc. So when we layer all these things together, you may only back squat once every 2 weeks, which is less than ideal, but again, we try to maximize exposure across as many of these different movements as possible. So hopefully that explains the strength programming a little bit. We try to, over the course of 12 weeks, kind of bias the focus a little bit, so you're going to see more back squatting than front squatting sometimes, you'll see more front squatting than back squatting sometimes, and so on and so forth. So that's the strength training. Okay, so hopefully what I covered earlier gives you a good idea of our strength program, how we arrive at the different rep schemes, the different movements, and how things are sort of progressed and layered over the course of 6, 10, 12-week cycles. So the second half of our programming arc here is the energy systems training, or the conditioning, the Metcon part, the second half of most workouts. And what we want to do here is, again, sort of distribute the exposure you get to the different energy systems. And so if we break them down, we go all the way from the creatine phosphate system. We have this anaerobic piece, and then the aerobic, right? And if we want to get real into it, we can split this anaerobic between anaerobic alactic and anaerobic lactic. And these are basically 2 levels of the same thing. It has to do with the shuttling of hydrogen ions out of your system. But what you need to know is the whole purpose here is to create ATP molecules, right? And the creatine phosphate system is our fastest acting, our most intense. It's what's going to provide energy for those first 10, 12, 15 seconds of high energy activity. The anaerobic is still going to produce those ATP molecules in the absence of oxygen, hence anaerobic, right? And we can do it in the anaerobic galactic, where we're not producing lactic acid, or the anaerobic lactic, where we're producing lactic acid to help shuttle hydrogen ions out of the way. And finally, we have the aerobic system, where we create ATP molecules, but we need oxygen to do it. So this is sort of the slowest moving energy production system, but it also has the most capacity. So this is the fastest moving with the least capacity. So once you use it, boom, it's gone. It's going to take a little while to refill, recharge the battery, so to speak. And the anaerobic or the glycolytic is sort of in the middle there. And so when we create our conditioning workouts, frankly, we spend most of our time down here in the aerobic world. And we don't necessarily train that by going long, steady state, like that chronic cardio piece. but we can train it with intervals. You'll see like the 30 on, 30 off, 5 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 10 minutes on, 2 minutes off. Those are all different variables to train the aerobic energy system. The anaerobic pieces that you'll see are the prowlers, some banded sprints. We sometimes do like shuttle sprints or much shorter, higher intensity circuits where it's like a 2-minute AMRAP of like burpees and pull-ups or burpees and dips or something like that with a much longer extended rest period, because obviously this is the quickest to sort of recharge. I could work hard for 3 minutes and have 1 to 2 minutes of rest and I'm back at it. If I'm working in this energy system exclusively or predominantly, it's going to take me a little bit longer to recharge that battery, so to speak. So looking at the creatine phosphate, if we do like an every minute on the minute for 20 minutes of 3 power cleans, every minute we're hitting a pretty near maximal effort. So we're going to drain that energy system, and we're going to give it the duration of that minute, that rest period, to kind of recharge. Again, the anaerobic pieces like the sprints, the prowlers, banded sprints, things like that, and the aerobic pieces, the bulk of what we do in terms of intervals or AMRAPs, or even like a five rounds for time piece. For the most part, it's aerobic. Now, it's important to note that none of these ever exist in a vacuum without the other. So even as soon as the creatine phosphate system kicks in, where there's also elements of the aerobic system at play, it's simply we can structure our training to predominantly focus on one of the systems. Now, when we layer these in across the week, like I said, we spend the most time down here in the aerobic system. And I love to dedicate one day to that without strength training. The reason being is to give folks a kind of a rest from that nervous system pounding that strength training takes, because we would just burn out. So I love to have one day where it's predominantly focused on aerobic, plus that allows us to expand the length of that conditioning workout and to develop some additional capacity there. The rest of it we layer in across the week. I love to get at least one sprinting, one anaerobic day in. I'd love to do more than that, frankly, but we focus on the aerobic. Now, the movements that I pick for that and the time domains that I pick for that are to complement the strength. So if we're going to do like a heavy back squat or a near maximal back squat on Monday, you're not going to see heavy thrusters or even really light thrusters on Tuesday most often, because that's going to be less than ideal when we're looking at our strength gains. The time domains I also look to keep varied. I don't want to do a 12-minute AMRAP every day. I don't want to do a 30 on, 30 off every day. That's the whole constantly varied piece of CrossFit. But you will see touches on almost all of those patterns over the course of every couple of weeks. So we won't go more than really 2 weeks without probably seeing like a 30-30, 30 on, 30 off piece. And you probably won't go more than a couple of weeks without seeing like a 10, 12, maybe even 15-minute AMRAP. And obviously on the Saturdays, I program team workouts for community building. It's also something I'll come back to, but a lot of our training is based upon historical attendance averages. So we know that Mondays are busiest day, so we put that as the most important workout of the week. We know that historically Wednesday's our second busiest day, so that's generally our second focus of the week, just based on giving the best exposure to as many people as possible. Typically Saturday, just because we only have 2 classes and folks have a lot going on, is our least attended classes of the week. And so we dedicate that to like community team building, fun type stuff, longer type aerobic capacity workouts. So what I'll do is I'll post this video on Facebook, and if you have any questions whatsoever, just add them in the comments below. I'm happy to come back and answer them. I love talking about this stuff. In fact, I'm sorry, I wish I had made this video sooner. Had I known there were that many folks interested in sort of the why behind what we do. We're starting a new cycle next week. Actually, we're finishing up a 12-week cycle this week. So what I'll do is by the end of this week, or at the very least over the weekend, I'll shoot another video, talk you through what to expect in the next cycle, and we'll try to make a habit of doing that every time, so you know what to expect and you know where we're hitting. We just did Fran today as I'm shooting this. That is sort of a benchmark that you'll see again over the summer, and we can gauge some progress on that, and we'll work a couple more of those benchmarks in a little bit more often. So I hope this was informative. Like I said, any questions, let me know. And if there's other stuff like this that you'd like to learn more about, please don't hesitate to ask. While being terrible in front of the camera, I'll do my best to make some videos and explain more of the why behind what we do. Thanks.